Elimination of Violence Against Women says that violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between men and women. Violence against women is one of the crucial social mechanisms by which women are forced into a subordinate position compared with men. Violence against women is thus an act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm in women. In Igbo land, as well as other tribes of Nigeria, there has been a growing interest in perpetuating violent cultural practices against women and willful exclusion of this gender from socio-economic development of their immediate milieu. Of these violent cultural practices, violent cultural practices include obnoxious widowhood practices, wife battering, female genital mutilations, girl child marriages, rape, domestic violence, sexual harassment, marriage by abduction, forced marriage, forced abortion, violence by police and bosses in offices, trafficking in women, and forced prostitution perpetrated by organized criminal networks. In the article, une étude psychanalytique d'un champ écarlate de Mariam Abba et du Capérat Tonga de Khalis Beyala, Okoye Justina made the following observations. I'm sorry to cite it in French again. En Afrique, les femmes éprouvent une violence et une oppression épouvantable de la main de leur mari ou de la patriarchie. Elles éprouvent une violence psychique, une violence psychologique, verbale et même émotionnelle. Il y en a qui deviennent refoulées et folles à cause d'expressions affreuses qu'elles subissent. Taking it in English, if African women experience, in Africa, women experience terrifying violence in the hands of their husbands or patriarchy. They experience physical violence, psychological violence, verbal and even emotional violence. Some become frustrated and later become mentally deranged because of the horrible experiences they have gone through. The two books studied evoke violence, exploration, infidelity, and man's inhumanity to man, inflicted daily on African women by patriarchy, based on her experience. Khalis Beyala, a Cameroonian female writer, hinges on writings on femininitude, a term very close to feminism, but different in the way in which it advocates not equality with men, but egalitarian difference between men and women. In her essay, Lettres d'une Africaine et ses sœurs occidentales, Khalis Beyala affirms la féminitude est très proche du féminisme, mais divergente dans la mesure où elle ne prône pas l'égalité entre l'homme et la femme. Be that as it may, Beyala repressed anger against patriarchy and negative sexual experience may have burned her, and negative sexual experience may have been her reason for the multiple phallic or vaginal images that are abound in her work. Physical, emotional, and verbal violence, viz. Incest, infidelity, imprisonment, and inhuman battering inflicted on Tonga, her protagonist in Tutapera Tonga, points at Beyala's disdain for men. She projects this philosophy on her protagonists. In a bid to reaffirm her virility, a male character Jean in Khalis Beyala's Le Soleil qui m'a brûlé uses physical violence to subdue Ateba and make her desire him. This is a vile behavior most women experience in the hands of men in patriarchal societies. There is no gainsaying that the recognition of women's human rights remains easily disregarded in African society. While many people in different countries of the world argue that women are now self-assertive and can stand for their rights, African women still remain second-class citizens. They suffer daily infringements on woman violence, and how these women struggle to re-emerge victoriously from such enslavement. Justina Okoye stresses that all women should, as a matter of urgency, put all their courage into surviving their ordeal. Obviously, there is a unifying factor in all the works written by African women writers, and this is the desire and ability of women to respond to violence with violence. This is in line with Lionel's assertion cited in Obioma Nneka's mothering. Thus, though victimized by patriarchal social structures that perpetuate their invisibility and dehumanization, black female characters actively resist the objectification to the point of committing murder. Maria Magua creates her protagonist Mireille, who is consumed with love, but who, though too late, realizes that it is unwise for a woman to be consumed by a man, that she destroys all avenues of escape in case of emergency and leans solely on her man. But pushed terribly to the wall, Mireille forces her exit from the web through insanity by destroying Gogui, her only connection to the black world, her son. She attempts to destroy patriarchy represented by her husband, Usman Gay, who narrowly escaped death. Theodora Kachezibo, a non-womanist, often paints images of women who refuse to be cowered down by men, even when inflicted with physical violence. Their ingenuity helps them escape from patriarchy to ensure self-reliance, independence, and ability to register their self-assertiveness. In the Life of the Strong Ones, a young, vibrant, and assertive woman, Nnamdi, whose name hinges on patriarchy, chooses to be the fifth wife of a man as old as her father. She takes the decision so as to be free to carry on her trade. She believes that Alabogo will build a house for her as he did for her co-wives. Unfortunately, Nneka's dream was still born because Alabogo refused to build a house, a hut for her, but rather preferred to have her live in his own house, to be able to turn her around his little finger on desire. Nneka's attempt at proving rebellious and peevish made Alabogo renew his efforts to subdue her and tame her like he would tame a wild bird by clipping her fingers. Nneka took a bold step by deserting her matrimonial home to freedom, thus raising her voice of outrage against aberrant behavior and practice of patriarchy represented by her husband Alabogo. Nneka paid violence with violence and liberated herself from subjugation. African women writers attempt to expose violence used by patriarchy to suppress, subjugate, and discriminate against women in matters of decision-making and policy implementation. There are different types of violence. There is personal violence, there is woman-on-woman violence, there is rape, there is sexual violence by bosses in offices or men in power. There is domestic violence experienced in the hands of husbands. All these clamor for rectification. Domestic violence. The United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, in its resolution on the declaration of the elimination of violence against women, defines violence as any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental violence or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. This type of violence, therefore, is a display of unequal power affinity between male and female, which results in domination over and discrimination against women by representatives of patriarchy. They also forestall the full advancement of women, thus forcing women into a position of subordination. In an article captioned "Women, Culture and Human Rights in Nigeria" by Okoye Justina, she defines domestic violence as one of the socio-cultural practices that is inimical to a woman's esteem. In marriage, a woman is neatly rejected, aberrant, is neatly rejected and thrown out of her husband's house if she fails to bear a male child. This is culture. Worse yet, she suffers oppression if she has no male child or no child at all. Carol Larin-Zumobi, in her paper Domestic Violence Against Women in Nigeria, A Legal Anatomy, buttresses Okoye's reclamation first. Domestic violence is violence perpetrated and occasioned at home by known and identified perpetrators, but in our family. Thus, domestic violence does not end up with the issue of husband and wife. There are other contributors to this issue, and these include other family members, either extended or nuclear. Marital violence, also referred to as domestic violence, is a very serious vice in marriage and sustains the fact that the history of women is that of oppression, that of suppression, that of marginalization, and a history of liberation. In Africa, patriarchy, a mark of dominance, portrays women's personality in Africa as insignificant and inconsequential. Thus, they are deprived of their heritage and are overwhelmed with atrocities within and outside their matrimonial homes. Any woman who steps into marriage and most unfortunately fails to get children, or worse yet, begets only female children, sits on a hot stool. A stool too hot for her to sit on. This is because of the male preference of the patriarchal culture. This domestic violence is orchestrated by the desire of patriarchy to sustain a universal social order organized to suit the menfold and reinstate male domination of the female world. Wife battery. Financial problems in the home often bring about disharmony. Infidelity and alcoholic abuse spark disagreements between husband and wife, which results in emotional and ignominious situations on the part of women. According to a most recent research carried out by Okoye, JN, even learned women, elites, suffer the same thing in the hands of the representatives of patriarchy. Worse yet, pregnant women were seen to be no less vulnerable to battery than any other woman. Violence against children. In Nigeria today, there are other criminal acts that confront women and the girl child. Widowhood practices, human trafficking, sexual abuse are challenges facing the female gender. Child abuse is a traditional patriarchal practice which includes trafficking in children, oppression of children, child prostitution, child rape, incest, sexual abuse against children. The condition of children who are crushed under the weight of patriarchal dictates is too deplorable to be talked about. Justina Okoye noted that Kalis Bayala, Aminata Sofal, and other African female writers present radical challenges to humanist problems in Africa. In Tutaperatonga, the young African girl without a name and who was later forced into prostitution by a society oblivious of human identity, recounts how in Iningwe, the monstrosity, children are exploited, made to cater for their parents that should cater for them, and silenced by an absolute parental authority. Tonga regrets. Je suis une enfant. Je n'existe pas. Mon âge m'a annulé. I am a child. I don't exist. My age annuls me. This nefarious attitude subjects the child to psychological problems. She becomes a victim of child abuse and child prostitution. Later in life, after the terrible experience of incest meted out to her by her biological father, her only father, Tonga developed psychic imbalance. Female genital mutilation and rape. Adima Echendo, cited in Okoye, Justina, clearly states that female genital mutilation, FGM, constitutes one of the foremost harmful traditional practices that infringe on the sexual and reproductive. The reasons for female genital mutilation have to do with culture and tradition, power inequalities, the attendant compliance of women to the dictates of their patriarchal societies. It symbolizes the subjugation of women and control of female sexuality. Women suffer shock, urinary tract infection, hemorrhage, and high risk. Child abuse, we have already talked about. We have enumerated them in the aspect of sexual abuse in children and adolescents in the root of severe, it is the root of severe psychological and emotional consequences in life. Human trafficking is, it is women who are at the vanguard of human trafficking, the buying and selling of children, of babies, child labor, begging in the streets, rituals, sex trade. All these are, we are coming to show how women perpetuate all these things. Woman and widowhood. Patriarchy and marriage form the bulwark of the plight of widows in Nigerian traditional society. Widowhood is a state in which excruciating hardship inflicted by women, by tradition and culture, is assigned to women who lost their husbands. This hardship is psychological. It's a psychological harm on women, which leads us into the condition of widows in most parts of this country, Nigeria, where helpless women are persistently traumatized for the loss of their husbands. We are here to talk about women and education. In the light of glaring socio-cultural and political realities confronting African women, female writers of African descent and, have criticized the patriarchal culture which encourages the suppression of women. This culture urges the accentuation of the logic, women isolation and subtle exclusion from participation in national politics, because women are said to be intellectually, physically, and socially inferior to men. Brief, women are suffering and are subjected to mute existence. Consequently, some writers speak of silence, which represents the historical muting of women under the formidable institution known as patriarchy. This is, we have a lot in that paper, but then we have to talk about the strong women we have had in Nigeria and in the world. I will exclude that of the world, but I'll talk about that of Nigeria. In a paper, Gender Consciousness and Female Assertiveness, Justina Okoye insists that feminism in African literature wrestles with and busts such central issues as patriarchal power, agency, victimhood, motherhood, and silence. Motherhood, womanhood, and problem of women liberation occupy a fraught position in the works of African women writers. Many black African women writers have created characters that transcend the frontiers of gender consciousness and became self-assertive, having waded through the ripples, through the riptide occasions by patriarchy. There are many women that have passed through Nigeria but still have come out wonderful. Women possess a rare and subtle logic in their resolution of issues in the home, the office, and the society. They are the supreme realists of every nation. In Nigeria today, many educated women, even when discriminated against and most often marginalized by patriarchy, still struggle to pave their way into the political arena. It is evident that the word politics in Nigeria is synonymous with partisan thuggery and most unhealthy quest for power. Consequently, no reasonable woman can meddle with such boiling pot of man's inhumanity to man. Marriage is primarily for procreation, and the children so produced need to be taken care of. Thus, the woman who holds the family and keeps the child in place to ensure that the leaders of tomorrow are not left to devastate the country in future is not expected to contest these ignoble political elections with men. Worse still, the cost of running for the elective posts in Nigeria is astronomically high, and only the fraudulent can attain a fraudulent height. Be that as it may, some powerful, competent, and dependable women have been given political appointments. Such women include Professor Dora Nneka Okoye of blessed memory, the Nnanka-born star, married to Agolo, indigene, Obiageli Ezekwesili, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, to name only a few, whose exhibition of power management and coordinating capabilities are her peers. Okonjo-Iweala is a courageous, trustworthy woman politician who has served 2 terms in finance. Okonjo-Iweala, another woman, is Dora Akunyili, I'm cutting it short, who has served as the Director General of National Agency for Food and Drug Administration, Nnamdi. She later became the Minister of Information and Communications. Dora, as Director General, Nnamdi, used the power invested on her to eradicate as much as possible the woeful condition of the sick who were being treated with fake drugs. Dora, firm, indomitable, refused to compromise her conscience. She stepped on the toes of the wicked, but gallantly sailed over to the other side of the... May God accept her gentle soul in perfect peace. Obiageli Ezekwesili is the chartered accountant and is co-founder of Transparency International. She served as one of the directors on the global anti-corruption body based in Berlin, Germany. She served in her capacity as the Federal Minister of Solid Minerals and later as Federal Minister of Education. These three women and many others in the society have exemplified the positive interplay of power needed to give Nigeria a sound national development. Many institutions of learning are witnesses to my assertion. There are women vice-chancellors who are endowed with power, and they are moving their universities to an enviable height. Vice-chancellors, sir, I lift you higher for your foresight in realizing that behind, beside, in front of any successful man, there is a woman, a strong woman, an incomparable woman. Thank you, sir, Mr. Vice-Chancellor, for investing this power of another indomitable alter ego of Professor Dora Akunyili. She is none other than your Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Carol Arinzumo. A woman of integrity, a fighter, and courage epitomized. But Vice-Chancellor, sir, permit me to digress a bit from the already established tradition of inaugural lecture. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I've come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The good is often interred with their bones. So, let it be with Caesar. Let it be with our women. I have looked at woman condition, woman and culture, woman and gender, woman and politics, woman and violence, child abuse and others. But I have consistently asked myself the role of the modern woman, the role the modern woman has played in propagating these problems. There are challenges confronting the Nigerian woman in the home and in the society. Many atrocities plaguing the society in Nigeria today are aided and abetted by women. Over the years, women have been pushed to the brink socially, psychologically, and politically, and relegated to the background in issues of the overall development of the nation. Consequently, the modern woman in Nigeria seeks to transcend the social vision that is limiting and restricting her to the traditional submissive role of patriarchy. Women are part of propagators of certain ethnocentric societal ills. Violence, violent conflicts, corruption, fraud, and cultural aberrations. Today in Nigeria, human rights and women's rights are in jeopardy because women play major roles as traffickers. They play major roles as kidnappers. They play major roles in other criminal acts. Really, women have come up with ideologies which aim at redefining the life of women beyond the machinations of patriarchy. Pardon me, but the truth has got to be told. Such concepts are feminism, womanism, motherism, African feminism, sexism, Stewanism, Negro-feminism, Africana womanism, feminism. All these go a long way to using language and ideas to place women on a center stage in a male-dominated society as ours. If we go feminism, we shall look at feminism. There is no time, please. Let's move ahead. Feminism is a concept which incorporates the doctrine of equal rights for women. We stop there. We go over to womanism. Womanism, an ideology created by Alice Walker, is a different degree of feminism which concerns itself with the needs of the black woman. It implies black feminism, Africana womanism. This type of feminism is an offshoot of womanism created by Kenora Hudson Wins. Motherism is an ideology created by Catherine Acholono. It is Africa's alternative to Western feminism and denotes motherhood. It denotes nature. It denotes nurture. African feminism is a type of feminism introduced by African women which particularly addresses the condition of women in Africa. Stewanism is championed by Omolara Ogundipe Leslie. It is an African-centered feminism. Sexism is a belief translated into attitude and behavior which holds that one sex is superior to the other and consequently controls the power and authority vested on it by patriarchy. Negro feminism is championed in 1999 by Obioma Nneka and flows simply